In this video, I'm going to show you the initial setup, my first impressions, and how to use a Honda FG110 mini tiller. I was choosing between a few different models of mini tiller. I was looking at the Australian-made Atom mini cultivator or mini tiller. I was looking at the Husqvarna, and I was looking at this Honda. But importantly, all three use the Honda GX25 motor. This is the same motor I use in my brush cutters, and I found it to be an excellent little engine. It also means if I've got the same engine in a couple of pieces of equipment, keeping spares is just that much easier. And so when it was available, I was going to go for that motor in these models. The Mantis sold overseas also comes with this engine, and I certainly would have considered that as well, but not available in Australia, or not easily anyway, so it had to be struck off the list. Inside the box you'll find the tiller, you'll find some oil, so 10W30 is what it takes. It obviously ships without oil, but they do include some genuine Honda oil in the box, and it's plenty to fill it up. You'll also find the literature, so you've got the instruction manual and the registration booklet. This instruction manual is actually a really good one. It's got a lot of details on servicing. I have the Honda brush cutter, as I said, and those brush cutters, at least the one I bought, the book wasn't as detailed, so really good to see this detailed book included. To set it up, start by removing the packaging that's been placed around the tiller. They've got cardboard wraps and little cardboard between where the joints are. This is just to protect the paintwork as it's in transit. But remove that and fold the handles up. Be careful not to pinch the accelerator cable. I didn't even pay attention to it, if I'm honest, but I realised afterwards that it could be something that could happen. Unlikely, but pay attention when you're doing that. Then you just push the bolts through and you tighten them up. I'll warn you, these bolts were actually very hard to tighten for the first time. I didn't have a proper look at it, but I think the thread of the bolt must be cutting through the plastic to cut its thread, having never been screwed fully up before. So it does take quite a bit of effort to screw these tight. But do get them tight, you don't want these handles moving. As I said before, the unit does ship without oil inside. There's a nice little reminder here, do not start the engine until you put the oil in it. And as you saw before, Honda included some oil that'll get us started. Now these machines take hardly any oil at all. 80cc or 2.7 ounces if you're that way inclined. To fill the oil, tip the machine up on its head. Now if you saw my video where I showed you how to service the Honda brush cutters, it's the exact same. You're basically looking at the back of the engine as you did with the brush cutter. And when these engines lay down, the fill mark is the level of the filler. So you're going to fill the engine with oil until it's level with the lip of the filler. They do mention in the book not to overfill, but then they show this being the fill mark. So I don't know how you could overfill unless you sort of held it up on an angle or something. So don't be too concerned with that. Flat surface, put in as much oil as you can without dropping it all over the ground, and you've got the right level. It's really simple. And that there is a GX25 correctly filled with oil. So at this point you pretty much should be able to fill it up with fuel. You're ready to use the machine. But there is one more thing I wanted to check. So all these mini tillers have a serviceable transmission. You are required periodically to grease the transmission to keep it working at its best and give it the longest life. And so I thought I'd have a look at the transmission in this machine and see if it did in fact come from the factory full of grease. So to service the transmission, turn it on its side. Now note the air filter side is up. Remove the two tines, you just remove the split pin and then the tines can pop off. If it's been used a fair bit, they are going to be stiff, so use a bit of penetrating oil to loosen them up a bit. And then you'll see the two holes in the transmission I pointed out earlier. So there's two screws or two bolts with Phillips head screw tops on them, and they can be undone with a screwdriver or a wrench with a little Phillips head attachment. The one closest to us, so you can see it's basically directly under the engine, that's the fill hole. And then the second hole further back near the axle, that's the breather. So when we fill this transmission with grease, we're going to be filling through the hole closest to us and looking for it to exit through that hole closer back near the axle. I don't know if everyone knows this, but when I have to get grease into a small hole like this, I actually find it really hard to hold a grease gun on there. It's not made for that. And while you can get grease gun fittings that'll fit in little holes like this, or even screw in some cases, I find it's much easier to just get a small syringe, and you just put some grease into the back of a small syringe, put the plunger in, and then just use the syringe to inject the grease into whatever you're servicing. I use this technique on brush cutter heads, and I'm using it now on this tiller. It's just a simple thing, but it might save you some time and money. As it turned out, this transmission was nearly empty. Obviously there was grease in there from the factory. I could see it when I first took out the bolts. So perhaps there was plenty in there to run it fine for the first 25 hours, which is the service interval they recommend greasing it at. And I dare say there was enough for that. But in terms of being full, nowhere near. It actually took quite a few syringefuls of grease to fill this transmission up, and so I'm really glad I checked it. So if you've got the time, do check the grease in the transmission before you use your tiller. When you see grease coming out the breather, you know the transmission's full of grease, and basically that you've now serviced the transmission. You can put those bolts back in and you're ready to go. The tiller comes with these general purpose digging and cultivating tines, and of course you can only use the inner two if you want a narrower tilling path. But there are accessories available. There are aerator tines, dethatcher tines, a border edger, and digging tines also available from Honda if you are looking for specialty attachments. The tiller is now ready for fueling up and putting it to use, so let's get into it. The transport wheels are taken off for tilling. There's some videos out there where people leave these on while they till or while they cultivate. That's not how they're supposed to be used. I guess it still works, sort of, but yeah, take them off for tilling. When they come packaged, you'll see they're on the top bar of the top side of the drag bar. This is for storage, and it makes the tiller sit nice and level. This is how I'm always going to use them, because I'll just carry it around to the patch, etc. But if you do want to wheel around the tiller, you actually put them on the bottom, and it raises the tiller up and gives you plenty of clearance for moving around the garden. There's a interesting little pin setup that holds the wheels in. So I'll just take that out and I'll show you what it looks like. So it's just a pin, and you put it through and then clip it over the end like that. And if you do want to transport it around the garden, put the wheels on the bottom, give yourself plenty of clearance. Pin goes back through like so, and then you've got plenty of clearance for wheeling it around the garden. As you can see though, with those wheels on, it won't actually sit. It leans right forward. It's okay, I guess, but I won't use them like this. Being a 4-stroke, there's no mixing required. Simply fill it up with ethanol-free fuel. So this is this tiller's very first start ever. So you start by priming, by pumping the bulb. Then put the choke on. Make sure the switch on the handlebar is to on, and then just give it a few pulls with the choke on. Now this will be climate specific, but in my climate I generally only pull once or twice with the choke on, put the choke off, and these Honda engines start every single time. So it's what, 5 pulls for a brand new start. They're great little engines. These little Honda tillers are actually a little bit different to a lot of the mini tillers in that they can be used moving forward. So with the drag bar on, these tillers are actually designed to move forwards. And so they'll dig themselves in, and then when the drag bar hits the level of the soil, they'll be forced to move forward. And because the tines are twisting or turning in a forward direction, they'll pull themselves along. Tilling in this way takes hardly any effort. So you've just got to hold the handles to keep it steady basically, but you're not using any strength really to control the tiller. You're sort of just holding it stable. And so that's the advantage with this drag bar setup. You can use very little effort. I actually don't prefer to use these that way. And so while this works, I'm now going to take the bar off and show you how I prefer to use these mini tillers. I will quickly point out, this is an old veggie bed. I tarped it. I've had dead weeds everywhere. The purpose of me actually tilling this area is to try and rip up this old dead grass so I can pull it out, because it just takes so long to break down and it's such a nuisance, and trying to weed around it, I'm actually going to end up with more problems than if I just break it up and remove it. And this tiller is going to help me do that, among a lot of other things. To adjust or remove the rear drag bar, you simply remove this split pin, and then you can move it up and down to adjust it, or you can pull it out completely to remove it. Now, I made hard work of removing this split pin. I pulled the keys out and got a bit of leverage on it, but I didn't realize at the time, but you can just push the split pin from the other side, and it avoids the obstruction I was having between the split pin and the casting. And it's really simple if you do that. So remove the split pin, pull the bar out, and good to go. And with that rear bar removed, you can actually pull the tiller along or use it in reverse. This is the way a lot of mini tillers are actually designed to be used, and I find it's very controllable when you use a mini tiller like this, very repeatable, and it'll dig really deeply. So I much prefer to use these tillers in that way. In saying that, I am working with some pretty gross dusty ground with lots of grass that I'm cutting up as I'm tilling through here. Once I have these garden beds established again and I get the organic matter in there and I'm keeping it moist and the soil's nice, I can really see myself keeping that rear drag bar on and just using this tiller more as a cultivator and just zipping around, knocking out some weeds, trying to keep a clear boundary so the grass doesn't come back in. And when I'm in that situation, when I've got the garden to that level, that rear bar is going to be really handy, and just being able to go around it forwards and let the tiller do all the work to take care of those little issues really quickly. But yeah, when you've got to do a bit heavier work, this using it in reverse is the way to go, I think. Throughout its first session, the tines did pull up a lot of this dead grass and they wrapped around the tines. Every time except for one, it was easy to just pull out the back. But there was one time I actually had to remove the tines from one side to get the grass out. I did hit a few rocks and a few bits of wood that were hidden under the soil. Nothing bad happened. The tiller just jumped and you realised you'd hit something, and I'd just pick it up and move it out. If you do lodge something in there, you just remove the tines and remove it that way. As you can see, I did this, what was 2 beds. I'm actually rethinking how I'm going to do my beds now. But I did this area in what would have been probably 20 minutes if I hadn't been making a video at the same time. And I wasn't rushing or anything. So overall, I'm really happy with this little tiller. I can't justify a big tiller at my place. The problem of moving one around, having to store it, the cost, of course. And on top of that, I don't want to be tilling all the time. I'm not a no-till guy, but at the same time, I'm not someone who wants to till consistently. This will mainly be used as a cultivator and for clearing weeds a little bit more quickly and time economically. So far I'm really impressed with it. This isn't a review as such. I don't like to review things until I've had a lot of experience with them, and I've tried some of the competitors. I've done neither, but I like it so far. I did give the tiller a wash when I was done. Let's see how long that lasts. And then I got into the actual hard work, which was removing all that dead grass and distributing it between the chook pen and the worm farm. I hope you found this first look and impressions of the Honda FG110 mini tiller useful. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a good one.